The team behind Wildlife, you guys have known each other for a while. You and Jake Gyllenhaal did a movie in 2009 called Brothers. You and Zoe Kazan around the same time were on the stage in New York together in The Seagull. Zoe and Paul Dano, of course, are a couple in real life. Were you all talking about doing something together for a long time? Were you talking about doing this specifically for a long time?
Definitely something together. Zoe and I shared a dressing room when we did The Seagull. She played Masha, I played Nina, exactly 10 years ago. And she has written a lot. She's written lots of plays. She wrote Ruby Sparks. She's an experienced screenwriter. So I was always bugging her to write something that we could do together. But ideally for us to act together. And then Jake and I have known each other forever. And I had about 2 minutes in a Jim Sheridan film, Brothers, that Jake was in. And we had read plays together and talked about doing theatre together, and that had never worked out. And I'd always wanted to work with Paul, but never told him to his face. We hadn't discussed this. And actually, they'd worked on it for years, but it kind of came out of the blue for me. I didn't know. And Paul called me up on a Friday night and said, I'm going to send you a script and just read it and see what you think.
So I was curious to hear your reaction to the plot of the film and the arc of Jeanette. And I was curious if he had explained it to you or if you read about it first in either the novel or the script. What was your first reaction?
Yeah, no, he didn't. He gave no kind of context at all. Just said check your email. So I read it and had a completely fresh perspective and hadn't read the book either. So I mean, the first thing that really struck me was that sort of nostalgic whiplash that she's experiencing of sort of, the moment where you hear a song on the radio and realize that you cried about your boyfriend dumping you to that song, but 10 years before, and suddenly you kind of have that feeling of where has time gone, and I think that is what Jeanette is experiencing in a really negative way. And then there were so many interesting conversations with Paul and Zoe, but the amazing thing about the script that I read was that it barely changed to what we shot. I mean, if at all. And I think that was just down to the years that they had spent working on it. And, they had thought through every single beat of Jeanette's journey.
The 1960 time frame adds so much to the movie as far as the look and the feel and the language and the music. I've totally downloaded now Maybe by the Chantels, which is the song that you're playing in the car. I just love it so much. What did you find most interesting about this character in this time period and maybe family dynamics in general in 1960?
Yeah, I think, just the incredibly heavy weight on the mother's shoulders, on the wife's shoulders. I think part of what happens to Jeanette is a build-up of pressure. And I think it starts when she meets Jerry. I think they have a really lovely romance. I think it's all real. I think the start of their relationship is great, but there is a contract between them, kind of unspoken contract, that as long as he keeps up his side of the deal, which is he will get a job, and if he loses one, he will get another one, and he will be an all-round good guy and be a nice guy. And she will keep up her side, which is being a great mum and a great wife and wearing the apron and doing the meals and making good of a very little income, and every time they are forced to move house, making the best of it. But I think it's only when he reneges on his side of the deal that all falls apart. And because of the time period, she has no higher education, no discernible skills, no way of making a living for herself. So the crisis that she's in is that much more terrifying.
To see Jeanette, the change in Jeanette after Jerry leaves is fascinating. What kind of stuff happened from a filmmaking point of view to mark that difference as far as the costuming, maybe the way Paul decided to shoot you, and of course in the performance? How did you delineate before and after?
Yeah, so that was kind of the most fun bit, was figuring all of that out. And the complicated thing about that was that the very first scene that I shot was the scene in the diner, which is exactly smack bam in the middle of that week. So it's that was probably the hardest thing to shoot, because I just had no idea if I was doing the right thing. And I remember even texting Zoe the next day, knowing that she would have seen the rushes in New York, and saying, like, I think I just messed that. I have no idea what that was. I'm hoping for the best, but who knows? But actually, a lot of that was costume and speaking with Amanda Ford, because I saw that week in her life as a sort of identity crisis. As I said, the role that she's played for the last 14 years is perfect mother and perfect wife, and trying to do and say the right thing all the time. And when that veneer goes away, she kind of doesn't know who she is, if she's anyone at all. And so I think she's reaching into the back catalogues to try and find the version of herself that she could have been had her life gone differently. So I could have been a shoot beauty. I could have been married to a millionaire. I could have been a poet and lived in France. All of these versions of herself that were possible. And so we kind of explored those through the costume and the makeup, and that was really fun.
I think Paul Dano did such a fantastic job. I mean, you guys all remember him playing Brian Wilson in Love and Mercy a couple of years ago, but now he's proven himself such a great filmmaker. What are your remembrances and impressions of him as far as his demeanor as a director?
Just completely assured and calm and wonderful. I mean, I kind of knew instantly that he was going to do a really good job. I think you just have to see his work as an actor and know that he hasn't, whatever genre of film he's in, he's always really truthful. And I think that's all I'm really interested in doing. I just want to play a real person and tell a true story. And I think I knew that Paul would do that without fail. And he did. And being on set, he had such a clear vision of what he wanted to do, and he was so good at communicating it to everyone. And I think above and beyond that, it just helps that he's a really wonderful human being. He's just such a nice man, and people love him, and they wanted to do a really good job for him, and they believed in him because he's so talented. So he created a set where everyone came and did their best work. And then most particularly with me, I think, he made it okay to just do really terrible work, and that was really freeing and really helpful. So the scene that was probably one of the most complicated was the scene at Warren Miller's house where she's wearing the green dress, and she comes into it with an idea of how to behave, and that changes, and she's constantly having to change her strategy, and she thinks that she's aligned with Warren Miller, but she's not, and it just, every two beats she's having to and she's getting more drunk, and Paul was so great because he literally said, like, just do a terrible take, just do the worst thing you can imagine, just act so badly, and I won't let it be bad in the film, like I'll make sure that. But it was just a way of kind of helping me kind of relax and let go.
You mentioned the fact that you were making this at the time where you had a 1-year-old. I think you might have even been pregnant with your son while you were making this, or right around there or something. Yeah. Do you feel like being a mom allowed you to put your best foot forward in this kind of a role, or would it not have mattered? Could you have done this 5 years ago before being a mom?
I don't know if I could have done it 5 years ago, only in that I hopefully try to get better as I go along. So hopefully I wouldn't have figured it out. Maybe, hopefully I'm sort of learning as I go along, getting better. I think there are some things that are different now that I have kids. I mean, certainly my criteria for working has changed. The bar has been set so high by wildlife and by girls and boys, and the quality of the writing means that it would just feel like a cheat to do anything that was sort of easier and less interesting than that, because I wouldn't want to spend the time away from my kids. But it's I weigh it up, and I know that I would kick myself if I didn't do jobs like wildlife, girls and boys. And there are some things that just change. I think, there was a scene in the film where Joe comes home right towards the end, and he says, is everything, do you know what's going to happen to us? And I think Jerry just looks at the floor, and Jeanette says, I don't know. And I hadn't, I guess, given it a huge amount of thought. Maybe we hadn't rehearsed it or something, but in the moment of shooting it, it just suddenly struck me as completely tragic to know that I will not always be able to reassure my children. And they are 1, 3 years old right now, so I can pick them up and put a plaster on their knee and tell them that they'll be all right. But the idea that one day I won't be able to do that, and that, or that even worse, that I'll actually actively fail them, just was sort of suddenly terrifying.
Carey Mulligan, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It's great to see you.